You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Just Japan podcast, everything you want to know about Japan. My name's Kevin O'Shea, and I'm the host of this weekly, well, it's been a little while, podcast about everything Japan. And hey, if you guys are wondering, where has this podcast been the last few weeks? I'll get to that soon. But we're back with another episode, another awesome one. First-time guest, Thersa Matsuura, who is an acclaimed novelist, writer, horror writer, spooky tale writer, and the host of the Uncanny Japan podcast. Thersa was kind enough to stop by the Just Japan podcast and tell us all about the really cool things that she does, the stories she writes, the research she does, and about her podcast. And you guys are going to really enjoy this episode. All right, of course, folks, you can always find me, the podcast, all things podcast, over at justjapanstuff.com. That's the home of the podcast. Again, I really apologize for not being around for a while, but I'll tell you what the deal is. It's the end of the school year for me. I'm a homeroom teacher. I'm an elementary school teacher, and June is crunch time. That's when everything is due, all the final assessments, all of the scores and marks, writing report cards, which is quite a feat. I'll tell you that. It's a huge task. So, like report card week, we're talking, that's a 60-hour, 65-hour week. It's not easy. And because of the fact that the last few weeks have been filled with a lot of work, a lot of late nights working at stuff, working all day Saturdays and Sundays, getting things ready for the end of the school year. That's right, guys. Teachers do a lot more than just teach during the day. That's only part of our job. So I'm sitting here, by the way, in Beijing. I just heard my son scream in the background. I'm sitting here in Beijing, where we're based, and there's a huge thunder and lightning storm going on right now outside the apartment. Rolling thunder, that's insane. Tons of lightning. It's pretty cool. So I'm sitting here in the Just Japan podcast studios, watching lots of lightning flashing in the window. But I'm not plugged in, so it should be okay. I've been just super busy, and I just have not had the chance, the opportunity, nor the energy to finish this episode. And wow, that's a huge flash of lightning. That was really close. That was insane. Massive flash in the window here. Actually, that kind of blinded me. It was sunlight. That was really close. Play-by-play of a lightning storm, folks. It's the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan and lightning storms. I recorded this interview with Thersa a few weeks back, but now we're finally getting it up to you, to your earballs, for you to enjoy. And it'll be kind of an erratic pattern of content uploads, at least as far as the podcast goes, over the summer, because I'm going to be traveling a lot. This Sunday, coming up on the 17th of June, I'm going to be flying with my family to Japan. Going to spend about 2 weeks in Kobe, Japan. Can't wait. And that's where we're going to have, on the 22nd of June, the third Just Japan podcast meetup. Oh, you're all invited. The Harbor Tavern in Sanomiya, Kobe, Japan. It's going to rock. 6 p.m. Be there or be square. I want to get an hour of happy hour in there. I think happy hour finishes at 7. So, that's happening. And then I'm going to be heading to Canada for a couple of weeks. 5 weeks, actually. So we'll see how it goes there. I'm not sure what kind of recording I'll be able to do, what kind of internet setup my parents have. We'll be all staying at my parents' house, and we'll be doing some camping and a little bit of traveling and stuff. So we're going to be pretty busy. So it's going to be intermittent. But I tell you what, you want a lot of Japan content during my trip to Japan. Follow me on social media. Follow me on Twitter at JLandKev. That's my main Japan content Twitter feed. Follow me on Instagram at JLandKev. And of course, like the Just Japan Stuff Facebook page. All those links will be in the show notes at justjapan.com. And that's a great way for you to get your feed of Japan content. Oh, wow, my lights are flashing. Oh, boy. That's not good. All right. Got to unplug some stuff here, guys. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. I had to unplug some appliances and stuff. We've got a lot of appliances that we brought to Beijing from Japan. For those of you who may be new to this episode, I lived in Japan for the last 10 years as an international school teacher, and my family and I, last August of 2017, moved to Beijing, China, for a really amazing opportunity at a really big school doing what I do. But we brought a lot of our appliances with us, which means it's in China they work on 220 volts, whereas in Japan it's 110 volts. So we have a lot of big power converters. And for example, I just had to unplug like some air filters and things like this because I'm worried that they're gonna get fried. Because it's pretty crazy. Like lights are flashing in my apartment now and stuff, and you can hear that rumbling in the background. It's pretty cool. It adds a layer of frightening scariness to this episode, which is really good because we're talking to Thersa Matsuura, who is a spooky writer of sorts. Well, she's not spooky, but the content she writes about is. So that's it. So guys, that's a little bit about why I haven't been putting out episodes. I'm just simply busy with the end of the school year. I'm recording this right now, this part, the intro and outro bits of the Just Japan podcast on June 12th. It's the 12th. 2017. Last day of school for me is June 14th. Last day of work is June 15th. And on the 17th in the morning, we fly to Kobe. Kind of a long one, kind of a long flight because we just basically wanted to get the best price we could. So we're flying into Seoul, into Gimpo, Seoul Gimpo Airport, the old international one before Incheon Airport. And then from Gimpo to Osaka. And it's kind of a long trip, but it saves us like $600, which on the front end and back end of the vacation, there's several nights of fees for a hotel that we're going to need. So it's going to be a bit of a longer day, but it's well worth it. Yeah, I think we got like a 3 or 4 hour layover there. So we'll see. I used to live near there briefly, very briefly, near Gimpo, very briefly, like a couple of weeks. Yeah, long time ago. So yeah, that's it for what's going on here. Guys, there'll be lots of information over at justjapanstuff.com about all my social media links and about the meetup. I'll be tweeting stuff out there. So get on that. If you want updates, get on the Facebook, get on the Twitter for any last minute changes. Follow me on Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you got to do that, guys. That's the best way to find out about last minute changes. Or Facebook. If you like the Facebook page, for example, if for some reason we have to suddenly at the last minute change the venue or the location, which has happened before, if you're following me on Facebook or on Twitter, you'll know because I'll be updating stuff kind of like in real time. All right, guys. So sit back. Let's enjoy the Just Japan podcast interview with Thersa Matsuura, acclaimed horror, spooky tales of Japan author and host of the Uncanny Japan podcast. All right, folks, welcome to episode 188 of the Just Japan podcast. Another fabulous episode, another fabulous guest. This week, I want to introduce to you first-time guest, Thersa Matsuura. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Very happy to have you here. Yeah, so I mean, it's your first time here. So, yes. Of course, whenever I have a new guest on the podcast, I would be remiss to ask for an introduction. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in Japan?
Okay. Let's see. I am an American. I lived all over the States. My dad was in the Air Force. So we were always moving around. And I kind of got the moving around bug when I was in, high school? Okay. High school. I really got into China. Went to China for a little bit and decided, you know what, I need to study overseas. But China, I studied Chinese and I couldn't get the language. I love the characters. I loved the stroke order and what they meant, but I could not understand and I could not speak at all.
Sounds like me.
So, yeah. and then one day, then I went to university and I was back in the States. I was going to university and I was walking down the hall and there was this full scholarship, something to Japan. And I said, well, I never thought of that before. And I was really into martial arts too. So, both nice. China and Japan both have martial arts and I liked Buddhism. They both have Buddhism. So yeah, I applied for the scholarship and I got the scholarship, when I was a senior in university, stayed for 2 years, went back to the States, graduated, came back to Japan, got married. And I've been here, since 1990.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Quite a long time. Yeah.
Wow. So
and right now, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, continue. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say right now I've settled into it's a little private school, like a Totoro-esque. It's a little log cabin in the middle of rice fields and trees, and kind of teach there, and otherwise just doing my writing and my other stuff.
That sounds absolutely wonderful, to be honest. As all you guys out there listening know, I lived in Japan for 10 years, and I didn't quite live in a Totoro-esque place. I lived in Kobe, downtown. Well, not quite downtown Kobe. I lived on one of the wonderfully man-made islands in the harbor.
Cool.
But that was home, and it was a slow pace. And now I live in downtown Beijing, which is not as busy as one might think. But it's a big and busy city. But so you spent your entire adult life in Japan.
Now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So now I don't want to so much focus on just I know you have an amazing Japan experience, and but what I want to talk about is your writing. So you are a writer, and you've already mentioned that you do some teaching in a Totoro-esque log cabin, which I do want to come back to. I'm intrigued about that because I'm a nature lover and conservationist. But so as a writer, can you tell me what kind of tell me a little bit about? Okay, I guess this interview will evolve as we go. But tell me a little bit about the writing that you do. What kind of writing you do, and how did you get into writing?
Let's see. Writing. So I'm one of those people. I've always read. When I was a kid, I read all the time, and I did journals or whatever. I was 9 when The Shining came out, so I read that when I was 9 and just freaked out. And what was it? Someone told me my best friend, he put it in my hands and he said, read this, and holy crap, what's this? And he said, you can write too. You could make stories like this, right? You can make people feel like you feel right now. So that kind of got under my skin. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I can do this writing thing. But it didn't really like, this is what I'm going to do until I came to Japan, right?
Okay.
So you come to Japan, and I was here again, like I said, 1990. So this is pre-internet.
Yeah.
I had libraries and books, and mom would send books over, and all I had was writing. I got married, and my mother-in-law is what's the word? A piece of work. She's very interesting, and to make sense of everything, I just had to study and to write and to just kind of get all these emotions and these feelings out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started. And I kind of do dark stuff. I really like old Japan. I don't like the cutesy, kawaii culture so much. I'm kind of into the dark, yokai. Yokai's not so dark, but yeah, just that old stuff and superstitions and folklore and that tragic thing Japan has going on. So So
back to like when you're in Japan, you're writing. They say the early '90s. I mean, now when I started, well, I'm not a writer. I've been a blogger, and I make a clear distinction.
That's right.
So I've blogged and stuff, but I mean, I think I first started. I guess I first started blogging probably in the late '90s, '96, '97.
Oh, okay.
And I was a fan blogger. I can remember it was just when the internet was new, and there was a lot of work involved in blogging. You had to know a lot of stuff about you had to be able to script your own HTML. Put it all into Notepad. You had to upload it using an FTP protocol. Blah blah blah. So you didn't just have to be able to write something. You actually had to know the technical stuff behind it. There was no Blogger or WordPress then, right? So, when you first came, I'm curious, kind of in your early days of writing, were you publishing stuff in some journals in Japan or zines or kind of newspapers, local newspaper, English language publications? Were you doing anything like that?
It was back in the States. I would, when I'd go back once a year or whatever, I'd just go to the bookstore and just scour, and find there's just certain genre magazines. So I get these. And back in the day, again, there's no internet. So you literally IRCs, these little coupons that were like kind of like stamps, and you'd print out your whatever dot matrix. It wasn't that, but anyway, you print out your story and you stick it in there, and you'd have a return envelope, and just did that for years and years, and got slowly university journals and like little horror magazines. They were magazines at the time, yeah. And then slowly and slowly people just caught on, and the internet happened, and it was a lot easier to do. But yeah, I got into some back then.
Nice. Okay, so you've already mentioned that you like the kind of darker side of Japan.
Yes.
The kind of so I mean, I guess we've already kind of alluded to what kind of more than alluded to what kind of genre you like. So I'm curious. Like, I mean, you like to write about the kind of more traditional spooky side of Japan. What got you interested in that?
I think because I'm in it's a small town. It looks I don't know if I said this or not, but it looks big on Wikipedia because we kind of merged, like several cities merged or little towns merged. But the town itself is really tiny. It's a little fishing town.
Okay.
And there's just a lot of folklore. There's just I was newly married. My Japanese was I was learning Japanese. I wasn't proficient yet or fluent, and
yeah.
And things would happen, and everything was blamed on a ghost, or you were cursed, or I've been exorcised because my mother-in-law.
That sounds like back home for me in like Eastern Canada. I'm from
really?
I'm from a little fishing village of about like 800 people, Eastern
Oh,
Canada,
okay.
where they got two kinds of people: either you're Catholic or you're Protestant. That's
Okay.
it. That's the diversity, Catholic or Protestant, and it very superstitious place. Like never open an umbrella inside.
Yes,
Never
yes.
do this, never do that, and a lot of even like talk of banshees and stuff. Yeah, like
Right. Maybe that's what it is. It's just the small town, the old, passed down stories, and I could do no right. Whatever I did, it was wrong, or I was inviting. My mother-in-law was convinced that she used to tell me I was sticky. She's like, "You're so sticky. You're so sticky." I'm like, "I'm sticky," and I'm looking it up, right? And then, okay, I'm sticky. What does that mean? And she said, "Well, ghosts, they like you. They just like sticking to you and wreaking havoc on those around you." And
really, wow.
So things like that, and I was kind of losing my mind because I have no friends. It's me. I'm alone here. My husband's at work all day and night. I'm with her in the house, and I'm trying to get by. So I would, bicycle to the library and start just reading, and like, why is she saying this? And the more I read, I got to the point in, culture shock, where, you kind of like, you're fighting and you either take it or you leave it. And I just had this epiphany one day that it's not good or it's not bad. It's just different. It's like you just have to understand that the cultures, you can say it's good and bad, and people sometimes get into that, like, Japan's the best in the world, or Japan's the worst in the world, or, they're wrong when they do this. But instead of that, just it's a totally different culture. And the reason she says these things, it's for a reason. She's been brought up, thinking this. And then everything changed. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is something that I could write about, I could tell other people about, because I don't know anyone who thinks like this. And it was really fascinating. It still is. So and that was just the dark. It was all dark stuff that fascinated me. So
essentially, I mean, like local folklore is what became.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
You became woke to local folklore.
I became woke.
You're woke. No, but I mean, I totally get what you're talking about. Like that whole you have more experience in Japan than I do, but I mean, I was there for 10 years, long enough to know. And my wife is Japanese. My kids were born there, and blah blah. But I mean, before I lived in Japan, I lived in Korea for 5 years. I mean, I've been in Asia for pretty much most of my adult life, and I suppose. I don't even want to say shogunai. It's not a shogunai thing, like about the Japanese kind of like way of thinking. It's just like this is different, and that's the way it is. And they're not right, they're not wrong, they're just different, and that's how it is. But I mean, but embracing folklore, that's a really interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the first one on this show after 188 episodes who we have this story arc with, which is very cool. So you started, you got interested in, I mean, obviously because of the influences around you, your mother-in-law, the people in the local community. Now, I've listened to, I've listened to your podcast, and you are a writer, and you obviously have to research these different things. So
Right.
before I move, one thing I'm curious about, and you've already kind of talked a little bit about, when you first arrived, your Japanese was, you were not quite proficient. Um,
Mm.
you obviously, I'm already assuming that, and I'm, I guess one thing about some foreigners in Japan is they like to compare their Japanese chops to, like, like the high school boys in bench pressing, right? How
Right.
how many kanji do you know? How much can you bench press and this and that?
Exactly.
But I mean, you've been living and functioning in Japan for quite some time, so obviously, you're proficient in the language, spoken but also written. So with the research you do, do you find that, maybe not at the moment, but when you first started getting interested in writing, was that quite a challenge?
Yeah, and it still is, I guess, because it's like a never-ending. It's also what is exciting about it, because you don't stop learning. Everything is new, and you learn a new phrase, you learn a new word, a new kanji, and yeah. So at the beginning, it was mostly word of mouth. Like, I just talk. I was after I moved out of my mother-in-law's house. There's just like all these old women that lived around me,
Yeah.
and they'd come over and they'd berate me for hanging out jeans with holes in them because it was inviting ghosts into that, whatever, right?
Really,
So, but
really, wow, okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of
That's
nutty
awesome.
stuff going on, and yeah, so I would just talk to them. So that's, at the beginning, it was just that, and then I was, slowly. I had nothing to do all day. I wasn't teaching at the time, so I was just studying and studying. And again, fluency is, I don't think there's such a thing because it's such, a language and a culture is so huge.
Yeah.
But it's exciting to keep studying, right? And yeah, so I like doing that. And I even recently on my podcast, to give an example, I was studying about, what was I studying about? The god of smallpox. And there was I was reading this stuff, and at one point it said that, you have the person, the smallpox, and you want to throw, get the smallpox out of a child, and you put these woven shoes on their head, and you say, smallpox, god of smallpox, go away. And then in Japanese it said, and then you light a fire and you burn. And I was like, what do you burn? Are you burning the shoes on the child's head? But there's no real explanation to it. And I was thinking, yeah, this is something a Japanese person would of course understand. I have to go find someone to tell me what this means, because even though I think I know, all the words and how it's all done, there's always nuances and stuff that, you're always learning, I guess.
So many nuances. And by the way, guys out there, everyone listening to this episode of the podcast, Uncanny Japan. That's a podcast that Thersa makes. I haven't mentioned it yet. We're going to plug this several times. Go to iTunes, Uncanny Japan podcast. You guys like your Japan content, new awesome content for you right there. Yeah, but it's really interesting. Because when you think about, you talk about these different references that maybe you don't know of, or I'm assuming there's gonna be a lot of kanji that may pop up that you don't know of.
Right.
But even like when I the first episode of your podcast I listened to, it wasn't that long ago. I was turned on to your podcast by the host of the Hanzai podcast.
Oh, okay. That's cool. I didn't know that.
The Japan,
that's so sweet.
The True Crime Japan podcast.
Yeah, I listened to him too. Wow, that's nice.
Actually, he informed me about you. He was like, "Hey, Kevin, here's someone you might like having your podcast." So I was like, and I have to admit, I apologize. I did not know who you were. I was not familiar with your podcast, and I listened to it, and you pulled me right in. And yeah, the first episode I listened to was with the Kakarembo,
Hitori Kakarembo, yeah.
Hitori Kakarembo, the hide and seek by yourself thing.
Yeah, and that's scary.
Yeah, that is freaky, and you tell
that still freaks me out.
but you're telling of it. You tell it very well, and you have a good microphone, which makes it even better. So, and I remember I mentioned it to my wife. My wife had never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's kind of a relatively new urban myth.
Like, I'm in my early 40s. My wife is in her early 40s. But I said, have you ever heard of Hitori Kakarembo? She was like, she looked at me like there was like a lobster crawling out of my ear. She was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I was just listening to this urban myth. And she was like, no idea. I'm like, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it was pretty creepy. Yeah. That's very creepy.
And there's even a movie now. And I watched the movie. I went as far as to watch it. It's horrible. It's really bad. They could have done it so much better. But yeah, that's another thing I love about Japan. There's the old stuff, the old scary, the old dark, the old creepy and tragic. But again, urban myths, right? There's all this new stuff, and kids just come up with kids anywhere in the world
Yeah.
have the best imaginations. And that's another, actually, I wanted to do a whole other podcast about just that, urban myths, new urban myths in Japan. I just don't have enough time.
Yeah.
And
Well,
there's
no,
just
I
so
think
much.
that would fit well into the Uncanny Japan,
Yeah,
sphere.
I could fold that in.
We just have to push you to make 2 episodes a month,
Oh, I really want to. I really want to.
Okay, so you're doing the okay, so you're making podcasts about creepy stuff, you're writing about creepy stuff. How do you find these stories? I mean, obviously, okay. I suppose you're hearing this through word of mouth, but there's research that goes into them. What is the process?
For the stories, I like taking a seed of something, like just an idea, like a tiny idea. One of the stories recently that was in my recent collection. It's called The Spider Sweeper, and it was just you see people out in Japan, and this probably people especially in the fall, there's spider webs everywhere. It's just like spider season as far as I'm concerned, and everyone's out sweeping the spiders from the trees and from their rafters. And I was at a temple once, and I was looking, and they're very high. There are lots of rafters. I'm like, God, there's got to be spiders that get up in there, and who gets those spiders down? There's got to be a person that sweeps those. So that was the original thought. And then from there, I just kind of obsess about who would that person be, and maybe it's just a very simple soul who's doing that, but then he's taken advantage of by a monk, and then it just spins out, and I just love doing that. That's
nice.
So fun.
Well, okay, so let's talk about
But yeah,
so I want you to, okay, so let's get into, obviously, I mean, you're a writer, and for everyone out there listening, Teresa's a writer. She has books published. She's not just a podcaster. I want to talk about the books. So can you tell us a little bit about the books you've published so far, about the kind of creepy Japan?
2 collections so far, lots of journals and magazines like here and there, but the 2 books, the first one's called A Robe of Feathers and Other Stories, and that was like back in 2009.
Okay.
And then so I did that, got the publisher, the agent, the whole 9 yards. Published the book, it went out, yay, whatever, fanfare, whatever happens. And then my agent calls me and he says, "Hey, so what's next?" And I had not thought of what was next. And he goes, "Well, you need to do a novel, because short stories are fun and people buy them, but not as much. If you want a fan base, you have to have a novel." So I'm like, okay. Never in my life thought about writing an actual, 300 page novel. So, okay, I have to build up. So I started writing like children's books and YA, and I was getting to the novel, but it was a lot of false starts. And as I was doing that, that's 2009 until now, I was still writing short stories. So that's when the second collection, I was publishing them in little magazines or bigger magazines, like one in UK and some anthologies.
Okay.
And suddenly a publisher just came to me and said, "Hey, do you have more of these stories? We really like this one story. We'd like to read more." And I said, "Well, yeah, I got some more stories." And I sent them. And they're like, "You know what? If you have enough to make another collection, we would be very interested in that." And I was like, "Holy cow, let me see." So I ran away to Portland for a couple of weeks on a writing retreat and just dolled up all these old stories I had and sent them in. And so that was the second one, which is called The Carp-Faced Boy and Other Tales. And that's the second collection. So
nice.
2 of those.
So how did you originally? I'm curious about this, kind of like through the whole. I mean, I have friends who are self-published, and some have done quite well by self-publishing, and others maybe not as well. I myself self-published a book back in 2010, a very niche thing, but it was a fun experiment, not experiment, I guess a process. I said I'm going to write a book, and I did, and I went through the whole process, and I published it, and I sold some copies. And
there you go.
It wasn't a fiction book. It was a kind of a how-to thing about teaching in Korea and Asia, something that's been done many times. But I went through the process, and I could say I did it. I wrote a book. I had cover art made, and I did this thing. But I mean, you mentioned that, for example, like when you first put out your first anthology, you had the publisher. And you had and an agent. How did that happen?
Right. Well, I was really, so again, this was like, at this point there was the internet, and I was able to submit online and stuff. So what I did is I just remember reading anything that felt like my story, like all these short stories. I'm like, okay, well, how did I do that? Anyone that felt like the genre I was in, because I felt I was kind of a weird genre, and I saw where they were published. So then I just blind, which is just you're not really supposed to do, but I just send them letters. I say, listen, I have these short stories.
Okay, yeah.
They're kind of like what you've already published. What do you think? And I actually sent to 3, and one of the nicer ones, the bigger ones, came back and said, "We'll send them. Let's see what we think of these things." And I sent them in, and the head editor guy said, "You know what? Yeah, I think we'll." So what
Nice.
I did was I had the contract in my hand. They said, "Yes, we want to publish these. This is what we want to do. This is blah blah blah." So I had the contract in my hand, and then I figured, right now I'm Cinderella, right? I've got a contract. And I really would like to have an agent. And nowadays it's a little bit different, right? Like you can have an agent or not, you can self-publish, there's so many different ways to do things. But back in the day, it was kind of, we wanted the agent to go through the contracts and everything.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of I wrote agents, and I found the best ones and the biggest ones I could find. And I wrote them, and I said, hey, guess what? I'm this person. I write this kind of story. I've got this contract. What do you think? And a really, really nice, kind of important as far as I'm, dude,
Nice.
in New York said, you know what? Yeah, let's talk. I'm going to call you. And what's funny is he the call. I'm doing air quotes right now. He made the call, and he calls me, and I don't speak English a lot, so I'm a little nervous. I'm used to speaking Japanese all the time, so I'm not really into English and the back and forth, so I'm not so good at that anymore.
Okay.
And he calls and he says, hello, this is Ethan or whatever, and is this Terry? And I'm like, yes, this is Terry. Nice to meet you. How are you? I just that pat line that, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. You? In Japanese, you do it.
Yeah.
And he pauses and he goes, you're a native English speaker, right? And I was like, yes, I am. Believe it or not, I really am. And it got better from there. But yeah, so then I had him. So he really fell in love with my work, and he's still with me. He's still waiting for the novel.
Nice. Well, no, that is a very kind of like an interesting journey, because I think like in 2018, a lot of people who are aspiring writers have, I don't know, kind of a very different, more of a, I don't know, Oregon Trail kind of pioneering way about doing things.
Yeah. Everything's
You build your following on social media. You publish your own story, and then you promote your own work.
Right. That's what I liked about him too. Is he just said, you know what, your job is to write. The publisher, these other people do all the footwork for you. And I was like, I like that. My job is to write. I don't have to do although I do like social media and stuff. But yeah. You had an old-fashioned take.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I mean, you were recently nominated for a Bram Stoker Award.
Yeah, that happened.
Is pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. Can you tell us now, for those, there may be a few of the younger folks out there listening. Bram Stoker, who's that guy?
Who's that guy? He's the guy that wrote Dracula.
He wrote Dracula, exactly. If you guys don't know Dracula, it's a creepy story. So you were nominated for a Bram Stoker Award. So can you tell us about that, and tell us about your trip to America, to the ceremony and stuff? I'm really curious, because I heard you talk about that on your podcast, and I get excited for you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That was just out of nowhere. I did not expect that to happen. And I got the you've been longlisted, and I was like, and I looked at the names, and Joe Hill was on there, and Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. Joe Hill's an amazing writer, so he's in the same category as me. Wow. And I was done. I'm like, longlisted on a list with Joe Hill. I don't need anything else. I'm okay. And I was just riding on the clouds. I'm fine. And then the day they said the short list was going to come out, it was middle of the night here, and I'm like, I'm just not going to check my mail, because I'm just going to be disappointed, or I'm just not going to, I couldn't sleep anyway. Like 2:00, my phone bings, and I'm like, if I read my mail and it's bad news, I'm not going to be able to sleep. If I read my mail and it's good news, I'm not going to be able to sleep. So I read my mail, and they're like, guess what, you made the short list. Yay. Wow. So yeah, I got to go. I went to Rhode Island, and it was really cool about that is there are these people I've known online for like 15 years, like writers and horror writers and dark fiction writers. Yeah. And I finally got to meet so many of those people. Amazing. They're just amazing. So yeah, I didn't win. Joe Hill won. but even in his speech,
it could be worse to lose. You lost to Stephen King's son. I mean,
I'm good. I tell you. breathing the same air. I'm okay.
Exactly. It's like losing a fight to a champ. You're like, you know what?
There you go.
That's okay. I'm happy that I got to the ring. Um,
Yep.
yeah, wow.
Exactly.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Mm.
And I mean,
It was real. I'm really, yeah, that was great.
so can I assume that you're a huge fan of the genre too, as in far as like consumption? Like you're reading lots of science, like Stephen King and that kind of thing?
Funny you mentioned that. Not as much as I should be. This probably is a horrible thing to say. I really don't read so much horror. I read literary. I do like dark, a little bit of science fiction. I kind of read all over the place. But even going back there to Rhode Island, there was so many authors I knew, but I hadn't really read their works. Or yeah. I'm probably a bad horror writer. I should probably read more. But I'm not. I'm. How do you say this? I don't like the gory over the top stuff. I like the real psychological stuff, the stuff that just gets under your skin, and you're like, oh my god, I can't stop thinking
I'm the
about
same.
this.
Like as far as I'm a fan of scary stories and stuff. But I don't like gore movies. I don't like the horror slasher stuff.
Not so much.
I've never been interested. Like for example, like one like chain of movies that I've had no interest in forever was like the Saw movies.
Yes, me too. I did watch one.
Thank you. Like gross.
No, exactly.
I saw the first one. I'm like, that's not scary. That's just disgusting.
Exactly. That's exactly what I thought. And I did the same thing. I watched one just because it was, like everyone was talking about it. But I'm like, no.
But for example, some Korean students the other day at my school asked me, they're like, Mr. O'Shea, what's your favorite Korean movie? And these are young kids. I'm like, my favorite Korean movie is something that is way too scary for you guys to ever watch. And it was, oh gosh. And now that I mentioned it, I brought this up, I'm completely
blanking.
Forgetting the name of the title, but it was like Once Upon a Time a Murder or something. Ooh. But it's like a true crime story of a real life murder that happened in South Korea in a small town in the 1980s that was never solved. And it's a true crime story. And it was just so brilliantly acted. And then at the very end, at the very end, there's like this police detective who had, 20 years earlier worked on the case and couldn't solve it. And there was like this body of a woman had been in this like drainage canal, like by this farm field. And 20 years later, he comes back and he's retired and he's looking at that drain and some little girl walks by and she's like, "Hey, mister, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just looking here." She's like, "Why?" He's like, "Something bad happened a long time ago." And she was like, "Oh, funny enough, there was a man here last week and he was looking in the same drain. And
my gosh.
And he said the same thing. And it was just like, and then it's over. And it's like, oh my God.
But that's a great ending.
But it was just this movie where there's, oh God. Korean movie. Korean, some of those, that was like a 1990 or 2003 Korean crime movie. But it was just like, oh, brilliant. But that is brilliant. There's no gore. You don't see gore. You don't see it happen.
Exactly.
It's all the suspense. And
that's even unsaid, right?
And I even and all you guys out listening, as I'm fumbling through the name of that movie, I will put a link in the show notes under about the movie. But I think it's I know it. Mysteries of Murder. Mysteries of Murder. If you type in Korean movie Mysteries of Murder, I think. Now I could be wrong, but good movie. Okay, so tell us about the Uncanny Japan podcast. How did your podcast, so everyone out there, Uncanny Japan podcast, how did your podcast come into fruition? How was it birthed, so to speak?
So the writing takes so long, right? You're writing and you get the research. And I had all this stuff left over. I had tons of really cool stuff that never made it into stories. Or even if it made it into a story, the story is read by how many people? It's not getting out there. I kind of thought about podcasting, but no idea how to do it. I'm not techie. I have absolutely no idea. But so on the back burner. So I have these notebooks full of stuff, and I have these ideas where I want to get it out, all this stuff out somehow. I don't know how. And then how many years ago, so Uncanny is about a little over a year old. It's about 2 years ago. Someone I've known online, a fellow expat here, Rich Pav, and we were friends, like just Twitter and Facebook or whatever. And he's one of the first podcast, if not the first podcast, or one of the
Oh
first. He's
gosh,
in
I
podcasting.
remember him.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember him from the early days of YouTube.
Yeah, Hello from Japan. Hello from Japan.
Yeah. Because I've been on YouTube.
Yeah.
I've been on YouTube since 2006.
Okay.
I'm still actually. I published a video blog yesterday. I've been an active YouTuber for a long time, and I remember Rich Pav was one of the original Japan content creators. I followed him before I moved to Japan.
Oh, cool.
That's where I was. Yeah, before I came here, I'm in China now, but before I came to Japan, I used to watch his video blogs where he would like show his kids and stuff, and
they're so adorable. Yeah. He's got like, what's it, 4 million views on some of his videos. It's just insane. And people would fly in from all over the world just to see him, and like, oh my God, I'm talking to Rich Pav, and I know him as my buddy. I mean, I didn't know he was,
but he was one of the original YouTube content creators. He was like a groundbreaker.
Yeah, he's the guy. And so, we just became friends. I kind of knew he did that, but I didn't know it was as big as it was. And he uses the binaural mics because he'd walk around or whatever. So he'd get downtown and get the feel of, a pachinko parlor or wherever he went. And he had 2 pair, and he goes, we were talking, and he's like, he goes, I haven't been doing my podcast, and maybe we could do something. And we were kind of working with an idea. Yeah. And I was so bad at I just couldn't do it. And we did a couple that didn't really fly. And he's a real honest, like from the gut, from the heart, puts his soul out there. And I've got this thing I want to tell you. I want to tell you a story about something I've researched. So it's totally kind of a different thing what I want to do and what he does. So, but he schooled me. He said, not schooled me. That's not probably not a nice thing to say. He taught me everything, the ropes, like how to do it, how to put my stuff on iTunes at the very beginning.
Oh, nice. Okay.
If you listen to the early Uncannies, I did it with Audacity, and it's like the sound is really crappy and everything's off, and there's just whatever, nothing.
I was there too. The first several episodes of the Just Japan podcast, it was like me wearing a Skype headset mic, and it sounded like garbage, and like people always make comments like, your microphone sounds terrible, and I'm like, I know, but I don't have money to buy a nice one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's helped me, and right now he's the one that's helping. I've got a Patreon page, and I get some money, and he helps me do the compression and edits and just making things sound so much nicer.
So he's your kind of your back end tech guy.
Yeah, he really is.
Nice.
It worked out that way, and I wish I could throw more money at him because.
But that's cool. I'm really happy to have that connection because I know who you're talking about. I know who that guy is.
Yeah.
I don't know him, but I mean, I think he would be familiar with me if my YouTube name would be Busan Kevin.
Okay.
Busan Kevin, because I lived in Busan, Korea when I started YouTube.
That's right. You were in Korea back then.
Yeah, not the most creative name. But there were a lot of people who fell into that trap when YouTube first started. You're like, I'm Tokyo Bob because I'm in Tokyo. And 3 years later, you move out of Tokyo and you're like, well, that's my
what
YouTube
do I do?
name. I can't change it.
Name. Yeah, exactly.
Wow, yeah, cool.
Yeah, so he's my guy.
So you got the Uncanny Japan podcast, and what is the deal with it? What do you do in that podcast?
So, So he's the one helping me with that. And I wanted to keep him short because just short's nice, and I can go on and just talk forever. So, these things short. So what I did is I just pick a topic, something, folklore, superstition, some language quirk or something, and or some urban myth, some creepy urban myth, and just hopefully 10 to 15 minutes, and just talk the crap out of it. This is something about Japan, and I go for things that I think Japanese culture is so, I mean, it's well known now all over the world, right? Because of the internet and everything. So anime and manga, but I think there's still so much that isn't known, and that's what I want people to hear about. I could talk about obentos, I could talk about Hello Kitty, I could talk about I don't even know, but I want to do the stuff that people.
There is definitely a lot of stuff, a lot of topics that are kind of pounded into the ground, right?
It's
been done so much, and I think that's like, for example, for all of you guys listening, I'm going to blow some sunshine Teresa's way, but the Uncanny Japan podcast is definitely something very different. It's a very different take. And I mean, there's not a lot of podcasts out there about Japan, but it's certainly, there's nothing like this. And I'm saying that in a very positive way. It's a very niche thing. I have to admit, I myself, growing up in rural Eastern Canada, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, especially when I was in university, I was so obsessed with folklore.
Cool.
And I spent every spare moment in the library at the University of Cape Breton, reading about the local beliefs of fairies and of elves and of different ghosts and spirits and banshees. Right. And I used to travel on my own time on the weekends to different places. There was a special place called the Fairy Holes, these caves on the side of this mountain, and the place where I was from, where they said their fairies lived in, and I'd go hiking there and go I wasn't really expecting to see fairies, but I read about this and I wanted to go to these places.
Right.
So I remember in my early 20s, I was I would say obsessed would be a proper term with folklore of Eastern Canada. And
that's fantastic.
And I have to admit that I am quite a superstitious guy. I'm pretty superstitious. So I do the knock on woods. I do a lot of there's a lot of things I do believe in ghosts. I do believe in that stuff, and I don't care what you guys say. I believe in that. But I mean, I've had a lot of bizarre experiences in my time. We have something back home we call forerunners, where you kind of see something before it happens. And so I'm kind of I'm in that wheelhouse. So again, when I heard your podcast, I'm like, I love this. This is really cool. and one thing that I found, even I have to admit, in my time in Japan, I tried to find out stories like this, or to search for it, but I don't have the Japanese skill.
Oh, okay.
I actually speak not very much Japanese, and I can't read kanji very well at all. Because I've my entire time in Japan, I worked at an international school.
No, there you go.
Which meant I was literally in an English bubble my entire time. So I'm one of those guys. I've got survival Japanese. I can go to an izakaya and sit down with a drunk old guy and have a chat.
Oh, that's nice though.
But that's about it.
Stuff there too.
But I'm not going to be able to go to a library and research anything about ghosts. Yeah. So the podcast. How often does it come out? And
once a month.
So once a month, and I'm curious. Is there a long-term plan for this? Is there a bigger picture plan for this? Right now, are you kind of trucking along, putting it out, seeing what happens?
Trucking along.
What are the goals?
Putting it out. Trucking along, putting it out, seeing what happens. Yes. I really these days. Everything's going on. My time, I just wish I couldn't sleep. I didn't have to sleep because there's so much I want to do.
I know. Tell me about it.
Right, right. There's so many things. My to-do list, and I get today I had an hour free. And I'm like, I have so much I have to do. I don't know what to do first. I would like to make more researched podcasts. I do a thing called bedtime stories too, which is I take old kind of obscure folktale, not the Momotaro, but more I've never heard of these, and I've lived here for 28 years, and I translate those and then I kind of retell them because they're not always really, really good stories, and record those too. So that's something else I want to do. I'd like to do an audiobook with that, or a real book, get a publisher, throw it up to a publisher and see what they say, or my agent, see if he can shop it around. So I do have all these ideas. Again, they're just they're all around me, vying for my attention.
I bet you could. Guys out there, Uncanny Japan, go do that. No. I think you could. I mean, you really you've got a wonderful niche. And your podcasts are really great. I love listening to them. It's really nice. So is there anything right now you're currently working on, or some future projects, things that you have? I'm sure you're ask a stupid question, right?
No. I'm just
I've got 5,000 things I'm working on. But what are you currently working on?
Immediate. I've got. I just yesterday, day before yesterday, I got contacted by the Asahi Weekly, and
Oh,
they want
nice.
me to do again, air quotes. They're doing a creepy story for their summer edition, because in Japan, summer equals scary stories, because you read a scary story and you get chills and it makes you cooler. So
That's
the
right.
editor got a hold of me and said, "Hey, do you want to do it?" Which is kind of, I'm really interested in this because it's, how do you say this? It's scary because I'm giving Japan back to the Japanese. It's for the Japanese English readers. So I'm going to tell my own version, my own tale, but it's set in Japan, about Japan, back to the Japanese. So I'm really nervous and excited about that. That's gonna be a good challenge.
I think
So
I think one of the interesting things though is like often, and this happens, is that people who are mm, new to a culture. I know you've been there for 28 years, but
but new, still
that's
new.
new. Often can shed new eyes, new light, new spotlights on a culture that people have forgotten about, even local people, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think
I
that's
get.
like one of the
Yeah.
things that like I even find back home in Canada. And now, mind you, I'm 42 years old. I haven't lived back home since I was 25. But you find a lot of people from different areas of the country or different parts of the world who will move to my old home area of Cape Breton, and they're so fascinated with the culture that they actually
Mm,
hash up new aspects of it and
right, right.
pump in a new kind of like revitalized energy into
Mm-hmm.
learning about it, and then actually
Mm,
through that energy teach the local people
mm.
about their own culture.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
And
That's what I
maybe
hope I can
you're
do.
that person. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to. Yeah, so that's the dream. That's one of the dreams. That's one of the dreams.
Mm.
Yeah, so I'm working on that. I've got a story coming out in an anthology called A World of Horror, and again,
Mhm.
this is horror stories from all over the world, and I've got a little Japanese one in there.
Nice.
And then the big thing is the novel. I really have to get the novel. It's in my head. It's outlined. I've got the first chapters. The agent gave me a go. He likes them. Let's do this thing. But again, time, and it's such a big project. So
Yeah.
that's the main things I'm
I
working on
suppose
right
it's just kind
now.
of like redesigning your life structure and just saying, okay, let's do this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I suppose
right.
it's a
Short stories are
challenge.
so easy. They're just so short. Yeah, something longer is a new monster to tackle.
Oh wow.
Mm.
But an exciting monster, an exciting kaiju, a fun kaiju to tackle.
Exactly,
As
exactly,
Ultraman would do, he would take that kaiju on front on and kick the snot out of it.
exactly.
I have a 7-year-old Japanese boy in my house who is an Ultraman
Oh,
expert.
oh.
Um, yeah, we just get
That's kind of full circle too, because one of the reasons I'm in Japan is because when I was a kid, right, a million years ago, I remember coming home from school, and at 4:30 was the 30 minutes or whatever, however long it was, Ultraman or Godzilla or Mothra, and I was just, oh my God, what is this? This is insane. I just love this stuff, and I guess it was always in me. And then whenever I passed that poster in the university, Japan, I remember Japan. That's the place with all the cool stuff. So yeah, and so your
all the
son's into
monsters.
Ultraman too. That's just
Oh yeah,
that's
yeah.
just
Well,
great.
my son is about to turn 8, but I mean, he was born in
Oh,
Japan and he went to
yeah.
Japanese kindergarten and elementary
Mm, mm,
school right
mm.
up until we left last year and we came here. So I mean,
Oh,
he's a
totally. This
Japanese
is
kid.
his. Yeah, this is his. This is
That's his
his
wheelhouse, right?
childhood.
That's what it's all
Mm-hmm.
about, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. And we
Oh.
and more of it pops up on YouTube, so I'm happy about that. So we get to show
Yeah.
him more Ultraman. Um, I remember him complaining to me one time. He's like, "Dad, I have a problem." Well, what's your problem,
Oh.
Kai? He's like, "I got about 7 or 8 Ultraman." I'm like, "Yep." And
Uh-huh.
he's like, "I've only got 4 kaiju. It's not a fair
Oh,
fight, Dad.
that's not
I
fair.
need more kaiju." I'm like, "That's a good point, son." He's like, "I think."
Let me go on to
He's like,
Amazon and see
we
what
should
I
go
can
to
do.
Toys R Us. This is still in Japan. We
Yeah,
should go to Toys
exactly.
R Us. I'm like,
Yeah.
fair enough. You caught me at a moment of weakness. I'll buy you 2 more kaiju today. Let's go.
Oh, oh, that's
Yeah,
adorable.
yeah,
I love.
yeah. So I'm curious, where can for the people out there, the awesome Just Japan podcast listeners, where can they find your books? Number one, where
Mhm.
can they find the Uncanny Japan podcast? At this point, just pimp yourself out. Throw the links
Oh,
at
well,
us. Tell us where can we buy your books? Where can we download you?
The books, Amazon. Amazon. Where else do you buy books nowadays? I'm so horrible with
Well,
that.
there's nowhere else. That's it.
There's nowhere, isn't there? I mean, Barnes and Noble. You used to go on
Maybe,
there and buy books just to spite Amazon, but now, just go Amazon.
maybe. I don't know. I've lived
So
abroad for a long time. I don't know.
I know.
In Canada,
I know.
Chapter? Is this Chapter still a thing, guys? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Look around.
If you see a building with books inside, go there.
Yeah.
So
Well, they
Thersa
used to be
Matsuura-
in the bookstores, right? And then now I think it's mostly you go through Amazon or so. I
Yeah.
guess they're still in some bookstores, but me, I'm Thersa Matsuura. I'm on Twitter. Uncanny Japan's on Twitter, on Facebook, both on Facebook, Instagram, both on Instagram. I got my website, Patreon page. I just kind of try to keep minimum everything going at the same time.
But I mean, so folks, by the way, you guys that are listening, Theresa's going to send me all these links. I'll put all these links in the show notes.
Thank you.
So when you go to justjapanstuff.com, justjapanstuff.com, everything you want to know about Japan, under the show notes for this episode, all the links will be there for her books on Amazon, her podcast. By the way, just type Uncanny Japan into Google. It's there.
It'll come up.
Yeah.
It'll come up.
Go search that out. All that stuff will be in the podcast show notes. And go follow her. Go follow her podcast, guys. There's not a lot of great Japan content out there. This is not only great Japan content. It's different. It's not like, hey, I'm here teaching English. Blah, 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 blah. Not actually, I shouldn't. That's kind of be slagging on people who have podcasts that might be about English teaching, which is interesting and important. But this is, I think, for example, Thersa, the reason why I started this podcast many years ago was because the only podcasts I could find about Japan were about teaching English. And I was like, okay, fair enough. But I don't want to listen to that. I want to hear more. Right. So I made the podcast that I wanted to listen to.
No, that's me too. Exactly. I write what I want to read and I podcast about what I'd like to hear about. Exactly.
And for me, it was, I have a very limited scope of knowledge about Japan. I mean, I am a Canadian guy with a Japanese wife and I teach elementary school at an international school.
Well,
I like geocaching. I like researching bugs and birds and conservation. But I can't do that for 4 or 5 years on a podcast. Like, it's very limited. But if I every week bring on a different person to talk about their life experience in Japan, like in broad things.
That's a great idea.
I've had people on who work at sake breweries, who own businesses, who do all these amazing things. Then, hey, cool, because each week I get on and I learn. And and all you guys out there in Just Japan Podcast Land, you learn. I don't want to keep you up much later, guys. We're doing this interview at night. Thersa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Everyone, go to the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. Go to all those links. Just do a Google search. Type in Uncanny Japan, Thersa Matsuura. Type that in. It'll all pop up. Follow her. Download her stuff. Follow her podcast. Subscribe to it. Okay, guys? It's really awesome. And I know a lot of you out there listening who are really interested in Japanese culture. This is something you would be, I know a lot of the listeners are really interested in Japanese history. This is a nice tweak.
Yeah, some history in there too. Yeah.
Folklore.
Yes.
It's a Japanese kind of dark folklore podcast. It's nice. All right. Well, Thersa, thank you so much.
And thank you. This has been fun.
Awesome. I'll lead in there. I'll let that. I'm not even going to cut that out. You can hear the sound of the thunder rolling. Well, appropriate as we finish up our great interview with Thersa Matsuura of the Uncanny Japan podcast. Go over, check out her stuff. Subscribe to the Uncanny Japan podcast. You will not be disappointed. And I will put links below to where you can find her books on Amazon. So Thersa, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Just Japan podcast. And I really hope we'll hear from Thersa in future episodes about writing and maybe other topics. It's always great to get a new, fresh perspective on the Just Japan podcast. So folks, that is it for another episode of the Just Japan podcast. Recording this part from Beijing, China, where there's a heck of a lot of thunder and lightning happening outside right now. My name is Kevin O'Shea. I'm the host of the podcast. I want to thank each and every one of you for being so awesome and taking the time to listen to this podcast, to download it, to share it with your friends and family, colleagues, classmates, whoever it may be. Remember, you want to get all the latest about the Just Japan podcast, go over to justjapanstuff.com. Go like our Facebook page, our Twitter, our Instagram. All those links are all over the place. Just do a Google search for Just Japan podcast. Remember, folks out there who will be in Japan on the 22nd of June, there will be the Just Japan podcast meetup. It's going to be awesome. Stay tuned for more about that. So guys, that's it for another week's episode of the Just Japan podcast. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're happy, hope you're healthy, and I'll be talking to you real soon.